Okay, let's talk about HTML elements. What are HTML elements? HTML documents are made up of HTML elements. That is, these are things we write in our HTML file that determines the content that you see. HTML elements are written with an opening tag, content in between, and ends with a closing tag. So whenever you see something that is structured in this manner, they are called HTML elements. This, if you remember in our previous class, are called tags. This is the tag name, this is the opening tag, this is the closing tag, this is the content. If you're finding it difficult to understand what tag is, I will link you a link below to the video where we discuss tag. So everything from this section to this section is known as an HTML element. The HTML element is everything from the opening tag to the closing tag, from the beginning to the end. Note, some HTML elements do not have closing tag. Not all, some does not have a closing tag. Now, because they don't have closing tag does not mean they are not a complete element. So let's explain those ones. So let's talk about empty HTML elements. HTML elements with no content are called empty elements. Similarly, they are the same elements that does not have closing tag. A good example is your BR. A BR is an empty element without a content or closing tag. The BR tag defines a line break, which means when I'm writing this code, anything after it should go to the next line. So that's what a BR is. Empty element can be closed in the opening tag like this. That is, when you write an element like this, it's called the opening. And every element requires a closing tag. Now, to close an empty element, most of them, majority of them, make use of slash in the opening tag like this to determine that you have opened and closed immediately. And that's why they are even called empty elements. Example of an element. So let's talk in general. What are examples of an element? Now, every element, remember, starts with an opening tag and a closing tag. So opening tag, the content that is what will be visible is this, and the closing. So from this position to this position is a complete element. But talking about this alone is a tag. Talking about this alone is a tag. Closing tag to be more precise, opening tag, and this is the element content. So from this point to this point, they are all known as elements. This is another element, and this is a single identifiable element. So let's move further. Now let's talk about nested HTML elements. Now, what we refer to as nesting is by putting another element as content of another element. So one element being the content of another is called nesting. So nested element can be HTML element can be nested, that is placing elements into another element. Now, all HTML document consists of nested HTML element. That means it is something you would always do. You will always nest your HTML element. Now, look at an example below. You have the doc type. We have your H beginning tag and the closing tag. And now let me explain. From this HTML element here to this element, this opening tag to this closing tag, the content of it is the whole of this, which means the header from here, the body are content of this HTML element. So the HTML element defines the whole document. It has an opening tag and closing tag. The element contains content is another HTML element, that is the body element and everything after it before the closing tag. So both the head and the body elements are content of this HTML element. Now the body element itself, same as this head, has its own. That means for the head, let's talk about the body first. The body element defines the document, the document body. It has an opening tag and a closing tag. The element content has other HTML elements, that is H1 and P element, and everything within and after them before the closing tag. Now this starts from here and ends here. All of these are what we call the content of the elements. So the H1 and the paragraph, they are like the content to this. Just like my first heading is a content of this H1, my paragraph is the content of this H1. The body content is this, the and whole element, and the other one too. So the H1 element defines an heading, it has an opening tag and a closing tag, and the element content is my first heading. Similarly to the paragraph statement, the paragraph element defines a paragraph. It has an opening tag and a closing tag. The element content is my first paragraph. So that's all. We'll see you in the next class.